Hey everyone, it's Kenji. I'm at home. It's 8:45 on a Saturday night, which means that it's a perfect time to start making dough for no knead bread. Now, no knead bread, it's like the easiest way I know to make bread. You start, here we go. We're gonna get some flour. So first thing you want to do is get a scale. Actually, let me show you why you want to get a scale. Scales make baking so much easier. The reason you want to get a scale is here, right? So if you try and do things by volume, we grab a measuring cup. Doesn't matter what size. So the big problem you end up with is this. Look. So if I scoop out flour in a measuring cup and say I level it off, so a third of a cup of flour there. That is 57 grams. Now, say I do it again, but I don't push quite as hard when I level it. Let's zero this off and let's see what we get now. Now we got 52 grams. And now let's say we do it this way, which some people do, where you take a spoon, and you spoon it into the cup. Level it, let me dump it in. Now we've got 48 grams. So that's 48 grams to 57 grams. It's a pretty wide range. And that can be an issue when you're baking, where you want everything to be kind of, well, what we do is we work in things called baker's percentages. Baker's percentages are just a way of normalizing a recipe to the amount of flour that you use. So it allows you to scale a recipe. So for instance, so when you're making a bread recipe, you'd always consider the amount of flour you have to be 100%. Okay, and then everything else is based on that. So this dough, for instance, is 75% hydration, means 75% water, 2% salt, or 2.5% salt, and about 1/4 to 0.5% yeast. So that means that no matter how much flour I start with, it's very easy to calculate how much of the other ingredients I need to make the dough correctly every time. So for this particular recipe, I'm going to start with 400 grams of flour. When I was at Cook's Illustrated, we actually did a test on measuring flour, weighing it out, and we found that there was a difference. It ranged from, a cup of flour ranged from 4 ounces to 6 ounces, depending on who was packing it and how they were packing it. So that's like a difference of, 400 to 600, that's a difference of 50%, which is a huge difference. I'm actually going to switch out to this other bowl, which I prefer. Sorry, get the bigger bowl first. I love this scale, by the way. This is an OXO scale, pull out face, which means that you can put your dough on it, you can put your bowl on it, and you don't have to kind of duck underneath to see. All right, so we have 400 grams of flour in there. I'm gonna add 1/4% of yeast. Maybe I'll make it 0.5%. So that's 2 grams. This is instant yeast, by the way. And honestly, you don't have to be super precise with your yeast. It almost self-regulates itself as it starts to rise overnight. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And now I'm going to do 2.5% of salt. So that's what is that? 6 grams of salt? No, is that right? 6 grams of salt? Audrey, is that right? 2.5% of 400 is 6, right? Yes. Yeah, a little bit more. That's all right. 2.5 to 3%. Oh no, it's a little bit less. Whatever. Told you I love this scale, right? All right, here we go. And then we mix it all up. No knead bread, by the way, has been around a real long time. But it became really popular, I think, in like 2007-ish. It was while I was at Cook's Illustrated, so I think it was 2007, maybe 2006, when Mark Bittman wrote down Jim Lahey, a baker in New York, wrote down Jim Lahey's method for it in the New York Times, and then like everybody was doing it. I remember like coming into the test kitchen one day and tasting this bread that someone had baked, and it was like incredibly good. And it had come from the New York Times. Well, the idea behind no knead bread, I'm going to add some beer. You don't have to, I'm just drinking it. So I'm going to replace some of my water with beer. We're going with 300 grams of water, or 300 grams of liquid. So let's do like 50 grams of beer-ish. Oh, a little more, that's all right. We'll get this up to 300 with the water. So the idea behind it is that normally the reason you need dough is that when you add water to flour, the proteins in the flour, gluten and gliadin, oh, that's a little too much water. Again, that's all right, very forgiving recipe. They form gluten. And gluten is a protein network that is what gives bread its structure. So like a really nice chewy baguette or a nice chewy sourdough, that texture comes from the formation of gluten. Now, normally what you would do is you would knead bread, and kneading bread, what that does is that it causes the proteins to interlink and form that network, that sort of net of protein that then, as the yeast produces carbon dioxide, it kind of puffs up the little air pockets inside there, and then as you bake it, those puff up even more from the heat, from the expansion of the gases, and that's what makes bread have that kind of light texture, the bubbles inside. So normally you would knead bread to form gluten. The way no knead bread works is that there's a high enough amount of water in there that the molecules kind of move around a little bit more freely than they would in a sort of low hydration bread, and as you let it sit at room temperature overnight, 12 to 18 hours or so, the action of the yeast, producing those bubbles, and those bubbles kind of pushing up through the dough, those actually do all of the kneading work for you, aligning all the molecules so that you don't really have to do any kneading at all. All you got to do is do this, mix it up. You saw how little I mixed it up. You just want to make sure that there's no dry flour remaining in there. You can cover it with plastic. I'm going to cover it with a second bowl that goes upside down like this. And then we're just going to let it sit there now for, I don't know, about 12 hours, 20 minutes or so. That's how long it's been. And you see, this is breakfast. We're about to sit down and eat breakfast. I'm going to quickly give this bread dough a few turns. So this is what the dough is going to look like the next day. So you can see it's kind of risen. It's nice and bubbly, very, very soft. What I'm going to do now, this is a sort of optional step, but I like to do it. Clean hands, I just wash my hands. What you want to do is give it like a few turns. And when you're working with a dough this wet, you got to kind of be very gentle and touch it very loosely. You don't want to let it rest on your hands or it'll stick. So what I'm doing is I'm giving it a few turns, which means I'm taking one side of the dough and I'm pulling it over the top and then kind of folding it over itself like that. I'm just going to do this like a couple times. And the idea here is that you're kind of homogenizing it a little bit so that yeast that has been abandoned in pockets with no food left is sort of getting reintroduced to more food sources so that I can ferment a little bit longer and rise a little bit more. And that's it. And I'm going to cover it up again and I'll come back to it in about an hour or so. You can wait up to 2 hours. You can wait even longer if you want. If you really want to develop flavor in here, what you can actually do is transfer this to a Ziploc bag or some kind of refrigerator-friendly airtight container. Someone dropped a flaxseed in there. How'd that get there? Some kind of refrigerator-friendly airtight container and let it sit in the fridge to cold ferment for 3 to 5 days, and that will really help it develop some more nice flavor. But today we're just going to do a same-day loaf. So I got a sheet of parchment paper here, and in the oven here I've got, this is one of the real keys. In fact, this is the real trick in this recipe, is using a Dutch oven to bake the bread. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. But I've got this Dutch oven in an oven preheated to 450 degrees. I'll talk about the science of that once we get the dough in there. And you can see this one is a Le Creuset, but I've replaced the normal, it comes with a plastic polypropylene handle. This one I've replaced with the stainless steel one that you can buy online, and that makes it oven-proof past, I think the other one starts to off gas at like 425 degrees or something like that. So this one will let you take it up to 450, 500 degrees, no problem, which is what you want for your bread. All right, got a little bit of flour. Dust my board up like this. A little gentle dusting on the top. And again, you want to work pretty quick with wet doughs like this, so don't let it like sit on your hand for too long. All right, so we got our dough. I'm going to take it and I'm just going to fold this over like that. Fold that over like that. Just very gently tuck it together, make a little seam. And that's just to kind of shape the outside of it. And I'm flipping it right back over. And there we go. That's basically it. That's going to be our loaf of bread. You can see how nice and soft and well, it's a high hydration dough, so again, you can see how I'm moving my hands like this. You don't want to really, if I tried to pick this up, it would stick to my fingers if I tried to pick it up and hold it. And I think that's one thing that a lot of, at least I had a lot of trouble with when I was first learning how to bake and first learning how to handle doughs. I always thought they should be much drier than they were and easy to like knead and easy to put to shape and move around. I guess because I'd been used to working with Play-Doh, but a high hydration dough like this, it is going to have like a very sticky texture, and you're not going to want to handle it very much. All right, put a little bit more flour on this parchment here. Now I'm going to pick this up and transfer it there. Whoop. Again, quick, seam side down. Okay, give it a little tuck underneath, make sure it looks nice and pretty. And now I'm going to take this dish towel. I'm going to flour it. Clean dish towel. It doesn't have to be brand new, but recently washed. Okay, I'm just going to put this right over the top here. And that's going to allow the bread to rise one last time without drying out. And hopefully the flour will make sure that it doesn't stick to the dish towel. All right, so that's the last rise it's going to take, and the next step is going to be baking. By the time you're doing this, you do want to have your oven preheating. Let your oven preheat for at least an hour, because you want to make sure that that Dutch oven is all the way up to the same temperature as the ambient air temperature of the oven. So you want the surface of all the Dutch oven and all the air inside the Dutch oven to be at 450 degrees as well. All right, so I will be back in an hour or so. All right. All right, it's actually now been about 3 hours. Even though I think I was only planning to go for one, but anyhow, this dough can go for its last rise for anywhere between like 1 to 4 hours or so. And I realized that this recipe so far, it's like I've messed up the amount of flour, the amount of water in it, and I've messed up the amount of rising. And it seems like I just consistently say, oh, you can do whatever you want and it's still going to come out fine. But that's because it's like basically true. You can screw this up in many ways and still have the bread come out totally fine. I'm just giving it a few little slashes here. That's going to allow it to puff out a little bit. I'm going to dust it with a tiny bit of cornmeal. You don't have to. You could dust it with flour if you want. It really doesn't matter. You could do cracked wheat, cornmeal. You could do nuts and seeds if you want. So bread's here. I'm going to make a little landing spot for my real hot Dutch oven. Actually, let's do it with the flour side in. Little landing spot for the Dutch oven. So this oven has been Dutch oven has been preheated within the oven to 450 degrees. Now, lid coming off. I do this on parchment paper specifically because it makes it easy to then, let's get rid of this excess flour, to then pick it up and plop it right in, just like that, okay? And then the lid goes back on, and this goes right back in to that 450 degree oven for about 20 to 30 minutes. Hopefully there's gonna be a weird cut in this video because I don't have a production assistant. And so I miscalculated the angle of my camera. Anyhow, so the point is that what happens, the reason why you put that lid on there is that, so in a good bakery's oven, like if you go to like a sourdough bakery, a bakery that a real traditional bakery, the oven will have a lot of moisture in it, and that's what helps give the bread a thing called oven springs. So what it does is it keeps the exterior of the bread soft a little bit longer, all that extra moisture, so that when it goes in the oven, a lot of the bubbles, the gas bubbles that the carbon dioxide that the yeast has been producing, they'll expand very rapidly. And that's what gives like a high hydration bread those nice big bubbles inside, that nice crumb structure. So it also keeps the exterior, it makes a sort of thicker layer of gelatinized starch on the exterior. And as the bread bakes, that's what gives you that really super crackly crust that you usually miss from home-baked breads. Baking it inside a Dutch oven is what helps do that because it traps steam in. If you have a steam oven, that's great. You can inject your oven with steam. Most home ovens can't do that. Electric ovens tend to be a little bit better about this because electric ovens don't need to vent gas out. So a gas oven, as it burns gas, you need to vent the byproducts of that combustion out. So gas ovens just vent automatically, so they don't hold moisture in them very well. Electric ovens tend to be sealed better. So you can put like a pan of water, or you can splash some water in the bottom of the oven, and that steam will actually stay in there and help you steam bread if you don't want to do it inside a Dutch oven. But the easiest solution is really to bake it directly inside a Dutch oven in your oven. And that's the big sort of trick in this recipe, aside from the whole no kneading thing. All right, so that bread's gonna bake for about 20 to 30 minutes with the lid on. Then I'm gonna pop the lid off and bake it for another 20 to 30 minutes until it's done. And then we're ready to eat. And in the meantime, I'm gonna get back to the steak in the fridge. So you'll find that video sometime soon. That's what this thyme and rosemary and shallots are. Anyhow, I will be back with you in... All right, I'm in the middle of my steak video here. You can see the steak cooking on the stove, but it's been about 20 minutes or so since the bread went into the oven, so I'm gonna take off the lid and check on it. And in fact, I already checked on it. You'll see that in the steak video, but all right, there we go. So you see, it's had that nice oven spring. It's puffed up. And you can also see it has this kind of shiny, gelatinized coating, and that's exactly what you're looking for. That comes from the steam that you get built up inside the Dutch oven, and that's what's going to give you that super nice crackly crust. All right, lid's off. I'm gonna let it continue baking now, probably another 30 minutes or so. All right, so now it's been, I think, about 40-ish minutes or so, and for some reason I couldn't find my bread knife, so continuing with the theme of it doesn't really matter. Oh, let me find a landing spot for that. Jesus God. Landing spot for the Dutch oven. Continuing with that theme of it doesn't really matter, we're gonna cut it open with a regular knife. And there you go, some nice, crackly crust. That is hot. Normally you'd want to let this cool before you cut it open, but I'm a little bit eager to see what it looks like on the inside, so I'm just going to do it. I don't know what that was. So bread knife, it would be the ideal tool for this job, but I'm using a hot in the middle, regular old chef's knife, because that's what I got. All right, so there you go. That's the crumb structure on the inside. You see plenty of holes, nice big holes, soft, springy, and a really nice thick crackly crust. And you get that again from the baking it in the Dutch oven. So no kneading at all. All you do is wait, and you bake it inside the Dutch oven, and this is what you get. I'm gonna grab some butter. Grab some butter. Let's give this a taste. Can you hear that? Wait, listen to this. It's too hot to even spread butter on. I could use a little bit of salt because of my bad math mistake yesterday, but no salt. Sit. Oh, Ramon's coming for one today too. Hey, buddy. Good boy. No knead bread. This is the easiest bread you can make. All right. See you later.